Siblings take refuge in an ancient cave, but what they see inside changes their lives. Brandon held his little sister's hand tightly as they walked along the dark trail leading to the hills on the outskirts of Albuquerque. The 12-year-old boy carried a torn backpack with their few belongings and tried to hide the fear he felt inside. Fleeing the Richardson house had been necessary. The last beating he had received from the man who was supposed to care for them still ached on the boy's back. This time, when he saw the man approaching Ashley with that strange look, Brandon made the decision he had been putting off for weeks. "Brandon, my feet hurt," murmured Ashley, his 8-year-old sister, trying to keep up with her brother's hurried pace. "Just a little longer, Ash, we'll stop soon," replied the boy, looking back once more to make sure no one was following them. The sun had completely set when they spotted the cave entrance. Brandon had heard about that place at school, where some older boys told stories about the hole in the stone hidden among the canyons. He never imagined he would one day need it as a refuge. "Are we going to sleep in there?" asked Ashley, pointing to the dark opening in the orange rock. "Just for tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do," lied Brandon, knowing full well he had no plan other than keeping his sister safe. The boy turned on the flashlight he had taken from the Richardson house before they fled. The weak light illuminated the stone walls and revealed that the cave was larger than he had imagined. The floor was covered in dry dirt and some leaves the wind had brought in over the years. "Look, Brandon!" exclaimed Ashley, pointing at the walls. The stones had ancient drawings carved into them, as if someone had scratched them with charcoal or stone. There were figures of people, animals, and symbols the boy couldn't understand, but what caught his attention the most was what was scattered across the cave floor. Personal belongings were abandoned there. A cloth doll with a faded dress, some dented aluminum plates, remains of blankets that animals had already gnawed on, and in the deepest corner of the cave a rusty metal box. "Someone lived here before," said Brandon, picking up the doll and examining it carefully. Ashley approached the metal box and tried to open it, but the rust had sealed the lid shut. Brandon used a rock to hit the edges until he managed to force it open. Inside were yellowed letters tied with string and black and white photographs. "Who is this family?" asked Ashley, looking at a photo showing 2 children playing exactly where the cave entrance was today. Brandon examined the photographs more closely. In one, a boy who seemed to be his age was holding the hand of a younger girl. Both wore simple clothes and had the same frightened look he saw in the mirror every day. "Must be people who fled here just like us," replied Brandon, feeling a strange tightness in his chest. They arranged their belongings in the driest corner of the cave and shared the last piece of bread they had managed to bring. The night was cold, and Ashley began to cough. Brandon covered his sister with his own jacket and kept watch at the cave entrance until sleep overcame him. The second day brought rain. Brandon woke to the sound of raindrops dripping at the cave entrance and realized Ashley had a fever. The cough had worsened during the night, and now she could barely speak without choking. "I need to get medicine for her," thought Brandon, counting the few coins they had in their pocket. While his sister slept, the boy examined the cave objects more closely. One of the letters was better preserved than the others, and he managed to read some passages. The handwriting was hard to read, but it spoke of a family that had hidden there during difficult times in the 60s. "My children play at the cave entrance as if it were a castle," said one part of the letter. "Walter says that when he grows up he will build a real house for all of us. Mary Catherine sings to chase away the fear of the night." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Brandon folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. There was something in those words that touched him deeply, as if they were written especially for him. Ashley woke up a little after noon, still coughing, but asking for water. "Ash, I'm going out to get something for your cough," said Brandon, arranging the blankets around his sister. "Don't leave me alone here," the girl begged, gripping her brother's arm tightly. "I won't be long. You keep the doll, and I'll leave the flashlight here by your side." Brandon walked to the nearest town, which was an hour away. With the little money he had, he bought some cough drops and a loaf of bread. On the way back, he stopped at a health clinic and asked about home remedies for a child's cough. "Guaco tea and honey," said the nurse, a lady with grey hair. "But if the cough persists, You need to bring the child in for an examination." Brandon nodded, knowing he couldn't take Ashley to the clinic. The questions would come inevitably, and he wasn't willing to risk them being separated again. When he returned to the cave, he found Ashley playing with the cloth doll and talking softly to it. The fever had gone down a little, but the cough was still worrying. "What's her name?" asked Brandon, pointing to the doll. "Daisy. She told me she lived here with her family a long time ago," replied Ashley, with the seriousness that only small children can muster. Brandon smiled sadly. His sister had always had a big imagination, and now she was creating stories to cope with the difficult situation they were in. He gave her the cough drops and divided the bread into small pieces. In the afternoon, while Ashley slept, Brandon explored the cave more thoroughly. In an area he had overlooked on the first night, he found more objects buried under dry leaves. There was a notebook with loose pages, broken pencils, and something that made his heart race. It was a photograph more recent than the others, probably from the 80s. It showed a young man with a scar on his forehead, identical to the one Brandon had had since he was little. The man was holding two small children and smiling at the camera. "This is impossible," murmured Brandon, comparing the scar in the photo with his own reflection in the surface of a puddle. The shape was exactly the same, a curved line running from the eyebrow to the left temple. Brandon had gotten that mark when he was 4, when he fell from a tree and hit his head on a rock. He didn't remember much from that time, only that it was after that accident that he and Ashley were separated from their parents. Ashley woke up in the late afternoon and seemed better. The cough had lessened, and she managed to eat a few pieces of bread without choking. Brandon showed her the photograph, curious to see his sister's reaction. "This man looks like you, Brandon," said Ashley, touching her brother's scar with her small finger. "It's just a coincidence," replied Brandon, but his voice didn't sound very convincing. On the third night in the cave, Brandon was awakened by the sound of footsteps outside. He quickly turned off the flashlight and pulled Ashley to the back of the cave, where they stayed in absolute silence. The footsteps approached the entrance and stopped. "I know someone's in there," said a man's voice calmly. "I won't hurt you." Brandon held tight to Ashley's hand, determined not to answer. It could be anyone, police, a social worker, or worse, Richardson himself looking for them. "I found a doll out here," the voice continued. "It looks like my sister's Daisy. It's been a long time since I've seen that doll." Brandon's heart almost stopped. How did that man know the doll's name? Ashley had made up that name, or at least that's what he thought. The beam of a flashlight lit up the cave entrance, and Brandon could see the silhouette of an elderly man, probably in his 60s. He wasn't moving threateningly, just waiting patiently. "My name is Walter," the man said. "This cave was my home when I was a child, just like you." Brandon felt a shiver. Walter was the name mentioned in the letter he had read, but that could just be a coincidence, an elaborate trick to get them to come out. "We don't want to talk to any adult," Brandon shouted from the darkness. "Go away." "I understand, son. I didn't trust adults either when I was your age," replied Walter, sitting down at the cave entrance. "But the girl has been coughing for days. I heard it from the road. She needs help." It was true. Even with the lozenges, Ashley's cough had come back stronger during the night. Brandon knew his sister needed medical care, but he couldn't bring himself to trust another adult. "How do you know about the doll?" asked Brandon, still hidden in the shadows. "Daisy was my sister, Mary Catherine's. We lived in this cave for 2 years when our parents lost their jobs," explained Walter. "I left some things here when we left, thinking I might come back one day." "You're lying. These things are very old," Brandon retorted. "I'm 63, son. I was here in the 60s when I was your age," said Walter, chuckling softly. "Time passes faster than we think." Ashley started coughing again, and this time it sounded more serious. Brandon felt panic seize his chest. He no longer knew what to do to help his sister. "If you really want to help, can you bring cough medicine?" asked Brandon, still not coming out of hiding. "I can. But it would be better to take her to a doctor," replied Walter. "I know a nurse at the health clinic who doesn't ask many questions. And then you'll call child services and we'll be separated again," said Brandon, anger in his voice. "Again?" asked Walter, with genuine interest. "You've been separated before?" Brandon realized he had said too much, but something in that man's voice made him want to keep talking. Maybe it was the exhaustion of carrying everything alone, or maybe it was the desperation of seeing Ashley sick. "Our parents disappeared when I was 6, admitted Brandon. "Since then, we've been moving from home to home, but no one really wants to take care of us." "I understand," said Walter, and there was genuine sadness in his voice. "The same thing happened to me and my siblings. We were separated too." The confession made Brandon feel less alone. For the first time in years, he was talking to someone who seemed to understand exactly what they were going through. "Can you show me those photographs you found?" asked Walter. "Maybe I can explain some things." Brandon hesitated for a few minutes before turning on the flashlight. The light revealed his thin, tired face, and Ashley's big eyes watching everything with curiosity. Walter smiled when he saw them, and Brandon noticed the man had tears in his eyes. "You look so much like my siblings when we were little," said Walter, examining the photographs Brandon showed him. When Walter saw the photo of the man with the scar, he stopped breathing for a moment. His hands trembled slightly as he held the image. "Where did you find this photo?" he asked, his voice choked. "It was in the metal box, along with the letters," replied Brandon. Walter touched his own forehead, and Brandon saw that he also had an identical scar in the same place. "This man in the photo is my younger brother, Richard," said Walter. "He had the same scar you see on my forehead." Brandon felt as if the floor had vanished beneath his feet. The coincidence was too great to ignore. "What was your brother's last name?" asked Brandon, his voice trembling. "Mitchell. Richard Mitchell," replied Walter. It was the last name listed on Brandon's birth certificate, the same last name he and Ashley carried, though they never knew much about their family history. "This can't be happening," murmured Brandon, feeling dizzy. Ashley, who had been following the entire conversation in silence, approached Walter and touched his scar with her little finger, just as she did with Brandon. "Are you our family?" asked the girl, with the simplicity that only children can have when asking the most important questions. Walter looked at the two siblings and felt his heart might burst with emotion. All these years, he had been searching for his lost siblings and for the children Richard had had. He never imagined fate would bring them back to the same place where it all began. "I think so, little one," replied Walter, his voice choked. "I think you are my grandnephew and grandniece." Brandon was still processing everything when Ashley began to cough violently. This time the cough didn't stop, and the girl began to have trouble breathing. Walter didn't hesitate. "I need to take her to the hospital now," he said, picking Ashley up. "You can trust me." Brandon had to make the most difficult decision of his life. He could remain suspicious and risk his sister's life, or he could bet on this man who claimed to be their family. He looked into Walter's eyes and saw the same determination he felt when protecting Ashley. "All right," said Brandon. "But I'm coming too." Albuquerque General Hospital was almost empty in the early morning. Walter explained to the nurse on duty that the children were his grandnephew and grandniece, and that they were spending a few days with him when Ashley started feeling sick. "She has an inflammation in her lungs," said the doctor after examining Ashley. "Nothing serious, but she needs antibiotics and a few days of observation." Brandon never left the bedside where Ashley was sleeping, sedated by the medication. Walter had taken care of all the paperwork and spoken with the hospital staff. "How did you get them to believe we are your family?" asked Brandon when Walter returned to the room. "Because we probably are," replied Walter, showing some old documents he had brought from home. "I've spent the last 40 years looking for my siblings." The documents included birth certificates, orphanage records, and even some letters Richard had written to Walter before disappearing. In one of the letters, Richard mentioned he had gotten married and had 2 children, a boy and a girl. "Your parents never really disappeared," said Walter carefully. "They were in an accident when you were little. I was looking for you, but the child welfare system placed you in temporary homes without notifying me." Brandon felt anger and relief at the same time. Anger for having lost all those years away from family, and relief for finally having answers to questions that had tormented him for so long. "Why didn't you find us before?" asked Brandon. "I tried. I visited dozens of orphanages and foster homes, but you had always been transferred somewhere else," explained Walter. The system didn't make things easy for families trying to reunite with lost children. Ashley woke up the next day feeling much better. The antibiotics had started to take effect, and she managed to eat breakfast without coughing. When she saw Walter sitting in the chair next to the bed, she smiled as if she had known him for a long time. "Uncle Walter," she said, trying out the name. "You can call me that, yes," Walter replied, his eyes shining with joy. A social worker appeared at the hospital in the afternoon to check on the children's situation. Brandon grew tense, but Walter received her calmly and showed all the documents proving the family relationship. "You'll need to do some DNA tests to officially confirm it," said the social worker, "and I'll need to verify the living conditions before authorizing custody." "I understand," Walter replied. "We'll do everything necessary." Brandon realized that Walter wasn't trying to deceive them. The man genuinely wanted to take care of them and was willing to go through all the necessary legal processes. When they left the hospital, Walter took them to his home, a small apartment in the back of a public school where he worked as a janitor. The place was simple but clean and organized. There were old photographs on the walls and books scattered on the living room table. "It's small, but it's ours," said Walter, showing the room that could be shared by the siblings. Brandon examined everything carefully, looking for signs that this might be temporary. But there was something in the way Walter set out clean towels for them and made sandwiches for dinner that made him feel that perhaps, for the first time, they had found a real home. "Can I take a hot shower?" asked Ashley, marveling at the small but functional bathroom. "Of course, little one. Take as long as you want," Walter replied. While Ashley was showering, Brandon and Walter talked in the living room. The man told him about his life, how he had worked in several schools, how he had never married because he was always searching for his lost family, and how he kept alive the hope of finding them one day. "And what if the tests come back negative?" asked Brandon. "Then you'll still need someone to take care of you, and I'll still be here," Walter answered without hesitation. The response touched Brandon deeply. For the first time in years, he was talking to an adult who didn't see him and Ashley as a burden. The DNA samples were collected the following week. While waiting for the results, Brandon started attending the school where Walter worked. It felt strange to be in a classroom again after so much time moving from place to place. "How did you get them to accept me without school records?" asked Brandon. "The principal is an old friend. I explained the situation and she agreed to give you a chance," said Walter. "But you'll need to work hard to catch up on lost time." Brandon discovered he liked studying, especially math and science, subjects that made sense to him because they followed logical rules. During breaks, he helped Walter with small repairs around the school, learning about electricity and plumbing. Ashley adapted even more quickly. The school had a special class for children who had been out of the education system, and she soon stood out for her intelligence and creativity. Her teacher told Walter she had the potential to be an excellent student. "She's always been smart," said Brandon, pride in his voice. "She just never had the chance to show it." Evenings at Walter's house were different from anything Brandon had ever experienced. There were family dinners, conversations about the school day, and television watched together on the small living room couch. For the first time in years, Brandon could sleep soundly without keeping watch at the door. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. But not everything was perfect. Brandon still had nightmares about the temporary homes where he had suffered, and sometimes he would wake up in the middle of the night, checking if Ashley was still sleeping in the bed next to him. Walter noticed these struggles and sought help from a public network psychologist who worked with children experiencing trauma. "It's normal for him to still be distrustful of everything," the psychologist explained to Walter. "Children who have experienced abandonment develop protective mechanisms that take time to undo." The therapy sessions helped Brandon better understand his own feelings. For the first time, he was able to talk about the constant fear of being separated from his sister and about the anger he felt towards the parents who had left them. "Your parents didn't choose to leave you," said the psychologist. "Sometimes bad things happen, and there's nothing we can do to prevent them." Ashley also participated in the sessions, and Brandon was surprised to discover that his sister held her own resentments. She remembered more from early childhood than he had imagined, including details about their parents that Brandon had forgotten. "Mommy used to sing me a song to help me sleep," Ashley said during one of the sessions. It was about a little bird returning home. Walter was moved when he heard that. He remembered the same song which his mother used to sing to him and his siblings when they were little. It was further confirmation that they truly were family. The DNA test results arrived 3 months after they started living with Walter. Brandon was at school when the phone rang, and Walter personally went to pick up the documents from the lab. "Positive," said Walter with tears in his eyes when Brandon got home. 99.8% probability. "You are my grandnephew and niece." Brandon felt such immense relief that his legs trembled. Finally, there was certainty, official documents proving they had a real family. "Does this mean no one can separate us anymore?" asked Brandon. "It means you have a home forever," replied Walter. Official custody was granted 2 weeks later. The judge reviewing the case was impressed by Walter's commitment and the children's progress in school and therapy. "It's rare to see such a successful family reunification," the judge commented. "You are an example for other families in similar situations." Brandon felt proud, but also responsible. He knew it had taken a lot of effort to get there, and he was determined not to waste this opportunity. At school, Brandon became a natural leader among his peers. His life experience made him more mature than other boys his age, and he often helped students who were going through difficulties at home. "He has a talent for working with people," the school principal said to Walter. "Have you thought about encouraging Brandon to study education or psychology?" Walter was proud of the suggestion, but he knew Brandon was still discovering his own interests. The boy had shown an aptitude for technical subjects and talked about wanting to study engineering. "I want to build houses for families in need," Brandon said when asked about his future plans. "Real homes, where people can stay forever." Ashley was also developing very well. Her drawings caught the teacher's attention for their richness of detail and the emotional maturity they displayed. She drew constantly. The cave where they hid, Walter's house, scenes from school. "She is processing the whole experience through art," explained the psychologist. "It's a very healthy way to deal with change." A year after they started living with Walter, Brandon suggested they return to the cave where it had all begun. He felt the need to close that circle, to see the place with new eyes. "Are you sure?" asked Walter. "It could be emotionally difficult." "I need to see that I'm no longer afraid of that place," replied Brandon. The walk to the cave was different this time. Instead of fleeing desperately, they went as a family wanting to revisit an important piece of their history. Ashley carried the doll Daisy, which was now clean and wearing new clothes that Walter had bought. "It seems smaller than I remembered," said Brandon upon entering the cave. "That's because you've grown," replied Walter, laughing. They organized the old objects that were still scattered on the floor. Walter told more stories about the time he had lived there with Mary Catherine and the other siblings. Brandon realized he no longer felt fear or sadness hearing about the past. "Can I plant flowers at the entrance?" asked Ashley. "To make it pretty for other children who might need this place." "Of course, little one," said Walter. "It's a beautiful idea." They returned the following week with flower seedlings that Walter had bought at the market. Ashley planted each one carefully, watering them with water they brought in bottles. Brandon helped clean the area around the entrance, removing dry branches and loose stones. "Now it looks like a garden," said Ashley, admiring the work. During one of these visits, Brandon found something buried under dry leaves at the back of the cave. It was a hand-drawn map with lines that looked familiar. The paper was very old, but some notes were still legible. "Walter, come look at this," called Brandon. The map showed the area around the cave with a specific mark on a tree about 100 meters away. There was an arrow and the word family written beside it. "I recognize this handwriting," said Walter, examining the map. "It's from my brother Richard." Brandon's heart raced. Could their parents have left something hidden for them? They followed the map's directions and found a large tree with a heart carved into the bark on its trunk. "There's something buried here," said Brandon, digging with his hands at the base of the tree. It was a time capsule made from a PVC pipe. Inside were letters, color photographs, and some small objects. Brandon opened the first letter with trembling hands. "To my children, Brandon and Ashley," the letter said. "If you are reading this, it means you found your way back to the family. We always knew Walter would take care of you if anything happened to us." Brandon felt tears stream down his face. It was their parents' handwriting, preserved there all these years. The letter went on to explain the accident that had taken their lives, the love they felt for their children, and the hope that one day the family would be reunited. "They knew?" Brandon asked Walter. "Brandon, they knew I would never stop looking for you," replied Walter. "We talked about it before they traveled that day." Among the photographs were images of the parents with Walter, all taken in the cave years before. There were also pictures of Brandon and Ashley as babies, which the siblings had never seen before. "Look how chubby you were," said Ashley, laughing at a photo where Brandon appeared to be about 2 years old. "And you didn't have any teeth," replied Brandon, showing a photo where Ashley smiled toothlessly at the camera. The last item in the capsule was a small gold ring with the initials RM engraved. It was their father's wedding band, which Brandon could now keep as a memento. "Can I wear it?" asked Brandon. "Of course, your father would be happy to know you have it," said Walter. The discovery of the time capsule brought a sense of completeness that Brandon didn't know he was searching for. Finally, there were answers to all the questions, and more importantly, there was certainty that his parents loved them and never wanted to abandon them. At school, Brandon wrote an essay about his experience for his English class. The teacher was so moved by the text that she asked for permission to share it with other educators. "Your story could inspire other children who are going through difficult situations," said the teacher. Brandon thought about that. Perhaps his experience could really help other boys and girls who were lost in the foster care system, not knowing if they would ever find a family. That's how the idea for the Cave of Hope project was born. Brandon, with Walter's help and the school's support, created a support group for children living in temporary homes. They would meet once a week to talk, do activities, and simply feel less alone. "It's not official therapy," Brandon would explain to the participants. "It's just a place where we can talk about things other people don't understand." Ashley also participated in the project, helping to organize artistic activities. She taught other children to draw and express their feelings through art, just as she had learned to do during her own recovery. The project grew quickly. Foster parents, social workers, and educators began referring children who could benefit from the group. The school principal provided a specific room for the meetings and secured some basic materials through donations. "You are making a real difference in these children's lives," said the psychologist who had treated Brandon. "It's impressive how you've managed to turn trauma into strength to help others." Brandon felt fulfilled in a way he had never experienced before. Helping other children made him feel that all the difficult years had served a purpose. He was using his experience to build something positive. 2 years after finding Walter, Brandon turned 14. For the first time in his life, he had a real birthday party, with friends from school, a homemade cake, and wrapped presents. "Make a wish," said Ashley, holding the cake with the lit candles. Brandon looked around the room. Walter smiling proudly, Ashley radiant with happiness, school friends singing happy birthday, the small house full of love. He couldn't think of anything to wish for. For the first time in his life, he had everything he needed. "It's already come true," said Brandon before blowing out the candles. The Cave of Hope project continued to grow. They organized an art exhibition with drawings from the participating children, and the local community was impressed by the quality and emotion of the works on display. "I want everyone to know that children in foster care aren't different," said Brandon during the event. "They just need an opportunity to show what they're capable of." Among the visitors to the exhibition was a journalist from the local newspaper who became interested in Brandon and Ashley's story. After speaking with them and with Walter, she wrote an article that was published on the front page. "Siblings find family after years of suffering," read Brandon, holding the newspaper with trembling hands. The article told the whole story: the escape to the cave, the meeting with Walter, the discovery of their kinship, and the creation of the social project. The impact was immediate. "The phone hasn't stopped ringing," said Walter. There are people from other cities wanting to create similar groups. Brandon was nervous about all the attention, but Walter helped him understand that his story could inspire positive changes in the foster care system. "You don't have to become a famous person," said Walter, "but you can use this opportunity to help even more children." That's how Brandon was invited to speak at the Municipal Forum on Child and Adolescent Rights. Despite his nervousness, he took the stage and told his story to an audience of social workers, judges, educators, and politicians. "The system works when the people working in it truly care," said Brandon, "but more must be done to reunite families instead of just moving children from one place to another." The speech moved the audience. Several people approached him afterward to congratulate him and ask for suggestions on how to improve services for vulnerable children. "You have a wisdom that many adults don't have," said the judge in charge of Brandon's case. "Your experience is valuable for those working on these issues." Ashley, now 10 years old, was also developing very well. Her drawings had improved greatly, and she began writing short stories to accompany the images. Her teacher suggested she enter a children's literary contest. "It's about special families," Ashley explained to Brandon. "I'm going to write about ours." Ashley's story won first place in her age category. The prize included having her text published in a book featuring the best entries from the contest. Walter was so proud that he bought several copies of the book to give to friends. The Family That Found Each Other in a Cave. Brandon read the title of Ashley's story. The girl's story told of two siblings who got lost in the forest and found a magical house where a kind man lived who had lost his own family. In the end, they discovered the man was their relative and decided to stay together forever. "It's just like our story, but with a happy ending," said Ashley. "Our story had a happy ending too," replied Brandon, hugging his sister. The third year living with Walter brought new challenges. Brandon was entering adolescence and sometimes felt like testing his limits, like any boy his age. The difference was, he still carried the fear that any conflict could result in separation. "It's normal for you to have some disagreements," explained the psychologist during one of the family sessions. "That doesn't mean the family will fall apart." Walter had the patience to teach Brandon that disagreeing or getting angry didn't mean abandonment. They learned together to talk about problems instead of avoiding them. "Real families go through difficult times," said Walter during a serious talk with Brandon. "The difference is they work together to solve the problems." One of the issues they had to face was Brandon's educational future. His grades were excellent, especially in math and science, and some teachers suggested he try for a scholarship at a technical school in the capital. "It would be an incredible opportunity," said the principal, "but it would mean living away from your family during the week." Brandon was torn. On one hand, he wanted to take the opportunity to study at a better school. On the other, he was afraid of being away from Ashley and Walter after so long searching for stability. "What do you think I should do?" Brandon asked Walter. "I think you should do what makes you happy," replied Walter. "But remember, a real family doesn't disappear just because you go away to study." The talk helped Brandon understand that growing up and pursuing his own goals didn't mean abandonment. He decided to apply for the scholarship, knowing he would have his family's support regardless of the outcome. Meanwhile, the Cave of Hope project continued to impact the community. They had assisted over 50 children throughout the 2 years, and many of them were doing better in school and in family relationships. "You've created something very special," said the social worker, responsible for the region. "The rate of behavioral problems among children participating in the project has decreased significantly." Brandon felt proud, but he knew the project worked because he and Ashley truly understood what the other children were going through. It wasn't just theory or good intentions, it was shared life experience. During one of the project meetings, a 9-year-old girl named Emily shared that her parents had been arrested and she was living with an aunt who didn't want to take care of her. "I'm afraid she'll send me away," said Emily with tears in her eyes. Brandon remembered feeling that exact same fear many times. He talked with Emily about how to deal with uncertainty and how to find small good things even in difficult situations. "I can't promise you that everything will be okay," said Brandon, "but I can promise you that you're not alone as long as we're here." Brandon's honesty touched Emily deeply. She began to participate more actively in the meetings and gradually developed the confidence to talk with her aunt about her feelings. "Brandon taught me that I can talk about what bothers me," Emily told the social worker, "and that adults sometimes get angry, but it doesn't mean they'll send me away." Stories like Emily's multiplied over the months. The project was truly making a difference, and Brandon began to think about expanding the work to other cities. "Maybe I could study psychology instead of engineering," Brandon said to Walter, "to be able to help more children professionally." "You can help children by being an engineer too," replied Walter, "by building daycares, schools, homes for families. There isn't just one way to do good." The reflection made Brandon realize he didn't have to choose between his technical interests and his desire to help people. He could find a way to combine the two. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The scholarship result came out at the end of the year. Brandon had been accepted with one of the best scores in the selection process. The technical school offered training in several areas, including construction and architecture. "Congratulations, my son," said Walter, hugging Brandon with tears in his eyes. It was the first time Walter had called him son. The word echoed in Brandon's heart as the most natural thing in the world. "Dad," said Brandon, trying out the word. "Can I call you Dad?" "It would be an honor," replied Walter. Ashley was emotional about her brother's acceptance, but also worried about the separation during the week. They talked a lot about how to stay in touch and about the importance of Brandon following his dreams. "Will you come back on weekend?" asked Ashley. "Every Friday," promised Brandon, "and we'll talk on the phone every day." The phone expense was something that worried Walter, but he knew the importance of keeping the family united even at a distance. The principal of the school where he worked suggested a creative solution. "You can use the school phone to talk to Brandon," she said. "Considering all the social work you do, it's the least we can offer." The generosity of the people in the community continued to surprise the family. Over the years, they had received help in various ways: donated clothes, school supplies, invitations to Sunday lunches. "This is how a community should work," said Brandon, everyone looking out for each other a little. The last month before Brandon started studying in the capital was intense. They organized a farewell party for the Cave of Hope project, where all the children who had participated over the years were invited. "The project isn't ending," said Brandon during his farewell speech. "Ashley and Dad are going to keep it going, and I'll help on weekends." Several children were emotional about Brandon's departure, but they also seemed inspired by his example. Some of the older participants offered to help Ashley coordinate the activities. "You taught us that we can turn bad things into good things," said Emily, now 11 years old and much more confident. "I'm going to teach that to the new children who arrive." The farewell ceremony included an exhibition with all the drawings and texts produced by the children over the project's 3 years. The school walls were covered in colors and words that told stories of overcoming and hope. "You've created a legacy," said the school principal. "These children will never forget that they are capable of helping other people." On the eve of the trip to the capital, Brandon visited the cave one last time before starting this new stage of his life. He took Ashley and Walter as they always did on special occasions. "3 years ago I was here afraid of everything," said Brandon, looking at the cave entrance decorated with flowers. "Today I'm leaving here to follow my dreams." "The cave hasn't changed," observed Ashley. "We're the ones who changed." "That's true," agreed Walter. "You've become amazing people." They planted more flowers at the entrance and left a small wooden plaque that Brandon had made at school, a place of hope for those in need. "If any child ends up here like we did, they'll know that someone cares," said Brandon. The trip to the capital was full of mixed emotions. Brandon was excited about the opportunities awaiting him, but also nervous about leaving his family for the first time since they were reunited. "Everything will be fine," said Walter when they arrived at the technical school. "You are strong and smart, and if you need anything, we're here." The school dormitory was simple but comfortable. Brandon shared a room with 3 other boys, all scholarship students from different cities. He discovered that many of them had stories similar to his. "My parents separated when I was 10, said Tyler, his roommate. "I came to study here because I want to have a profession to help my mum. The classes at the technical school were much more challenging than anything Brandon had experienced before. He had to work very hard to keep up, especially in subjects like physics and chemistry, which required a theoretical foundation he hadn't acquired in his previous schools. "It's normal to fall behind at the beginning," said one of the teachers. "You have the intelligence to make up for lost time. You just need to dedicate yourself a little more." Brandon established a strict study routine. He woke up early to review the previous day's material, paid full attention in class, and stayed in the library late studying with classmates. The weekends at home became even more precious. "How is it going?" Ashley would ask every Friday when he arrived. "Hard but good," Brandon would reply. "I'm learning a lot of new things." During the weekends, Brandon continued participating in the Cave of Hope project. He noticed that the children were always excited when he returned, and this motivated him to keep pushing himself in his studies. "When I graduate, I'm going to build a school just for kids like you," Brandon said during one of the meetings. "What do you mean?" asked one of the girls. "A school that understands you've been through difficult things, but doesn't let that get in the way of learning," explained Brandon. "A school that helps you discover what you're capable of." The seed planted in that conversation began to grow in Brandon's mind. He started researching social pedagogy and educational architecture, imagining how he could combine his technical interests with his experience helping vulnerable children. In his second year at the technical school, Brandon was already among the top students in his class. His teachers noticed not only his dedication to his studies, but also his natural leadership and teamwork abilities. "You have the potential to go beyond technical training," said the course coordinator. "Have you thought about applying to an engineering program after you graduate here?" Brandon was excited by the suggestion, but also worried about the costs of college. Walter earned little as the school custodian, and even with the scholarship, expenses were tight. "We'll find a way," said Walter when Brandon shared his concerns. "You're too smart not to have the chance to study more." During the mid-year break, Brandon got an internship at a construction company in Albuquerque. It was his first real experience in the job market, and he was fascinated to see projects coming off the paper and turning into real constructions. "This boy has a future," commented the engineer in charge of the project. "He asks smart questions and isn't afraid to work." The internship also brought a small payment, which Brandon insisted on sharing with the family. Walter tried to refuse, but Brandon insisted. "Family shares everything. Joys, sorrows, and money," said Brandon. "You taught me that." With part of the internship money, Brandon bought materials to renovate a corner of the house that could become a small office. He wanted to have a space to study on weekends without bothering Ashley. "You built this yourself?" asked Ashley, impressed with the desk and shelves Brandon had made. "I learned at school," said Brandon, proud of the result. "One day I'll build a whole house for us." Ashley, now 12, was also excelling in school. Her writing and drawings had evolved a lot, and she began to seriously think about pursuing an artistic or literary career. "I want to write stories that help kids like me," said Ashley. "Stories that show there's always hope." The progress of both siblings moved Walter deeply. He saw in them the fulfillment of dreams he himself had never been able to achieve. At 65, he felt his life had found the purpose it had always sought. "You've given me more than I've given you," said Walter during a Sunday dinner. "You've given me a reason to wake up happy every day." The Cave of Hope project completed 5 years of operation and had become a reference in the region. Social workers from various cities visited Albuquerque to learn about the methodology and implement similar projects in their communities. "You've proven that children can help other children in a very effective way," said a researcher from the State University who was documenting the project. Brandon felt honored by the recognition, but knew the project's success was mainly due to the involvement of the entire school community and Walter's constant support. "The most important thing is that the children learn they are not alone," said Brandon during an interview for the research. "When you know someone cares, it's easier to believe things can get better." The third year of technical school brought the pressure of college entrance exams. Brandon had decided to try for a spot in the civil engineering program at the State University, but he knew the competition would be fierce. He prepared intensely, studying until late hours and participating in study groups. "You're killing yourself studying," said Tyler, his roommate. "You need to rest too." "I know this is my only chance," replied Brandon. "If I don't pass this year, it will be very hard to get another opportunity." Walter and Ashley supported Brandon the best way they could. Ashley made colorful summaries of the subjects Brandon struggled with, and Walter took care of all the practical aspects of his son's life, so he could focus only on his studies. "Regardless of the outcome, we are already proud of you," said Walter on the eve of the college entrance exam. The exam was challenging, but Brandon left with the feeling that he had given his best. Now it was a matter of waiting for the results and hoping that years of dedication would turn into the opportunity he had dreamed of so much. While awaiting the college entrance exam results, the family received news that took them completely by surprise. The City Hall of Albuquerque had decided to officially establish the Cave of Hope project as a municipal social assistance program. "This means you will receive official funding to expand the work," explained the Secretary of Social Assistance, "and you will be able to hire people to help." Brandon was moved by the news, but also worried about the responsibilities it would bring. He would be in college if all went well, and wouldn't be able to dedicate as much time to the project as before. "Ashley can coordinate," suggested Walter. "She has known the project from the beginning and has a knack for working with children." Ashley was nervous about the responsibility, but also excited. At 12 years old, she would be the youngest coordinator of a municipal social program. The idea was bold, but everyone trusted her maturity and capability. "I'll need help," said Ashley, "especially from Brandon on weekends." "You can count on me," replied Brandon, "no matter where I am studying." The college entrance exam results came out a week later. Brandon had passed in 4th place on the overall list, securing not only a spot, but also a merit-based scholarship. "You did it!" shouted Ashley upon seeing her brother's name on the list published on the university's website. Walter couldn't hold back tears of joy. After so many years caring for other people's schools, he finally saw one of his own children entering university. It was the fulfillment of a dream that seemed impossible when he found the siblings in the cave 6 years earlier. "I am proud of you," said Walter, hugging Brandon and Ashley. "You taught me the true meaning of family." The celebration party took place at the school where Walter worked. Colleagues, teachers, children from the project, and neighbors took part in the celebration. It was the entire community recognizing the success of a family that had overcome all obstacles. "Brandon proved that it doesn't matter where you come from," said the school principal during her speech. "What matters is how much you are willing to fight for your dreams." During the party, Brandon received a special gift from Ashley, a framed drawing of the cave where they met, but now transformed into a beautiful school surrounded by playing children. "It's the school you are going to build," said Ashley, "for children like us." Brandon looked at the drawing and felt that all the suffering of the past had been worth it. Every difficulty, every fear, every night of uncertainty had been a step on the ladder that brought him there. "I'll frame it and put it in my university dorm room," said Brandon, "to remind me every day why I am studying." The transition to university was less traumatic than the move to the technical school, because now Brandon was absolutely certain of his family's support. He knew that Walter and Ashley would always be there no matter what happened. "The family we built is indestructible," said Brandon on moving day to the university campus. "It really is," agreed Walter, "because it was built with real love." The first years of college were intense. Brandon quickly stood out among his peers for his dedication and unique perspective on the social role of engineering. His projects always included concerns for underprivileged communities and sustainability. "You have a sensitivity that many engineers don't develop," commented one of the professors. "It's a result of your life experience." Brandon started working as a teaching assistant for some subjects, which provided him with a small extra income and teaching experience. He discovered that he really enjoyed teaching and had a knack for explaining complex concepts in simple ways. "Have you ever thought about pursuing an academic career after graduation?" asked the course coordinator. "Maybe," Brandon replied, "but first I want to work a few years to gain practical experience." During vacations, Brandon always returned to work on the Cave of Hope project, which had grown a lot under Ashley's coordination. They now served over 100 children a year and had a team of 10 volunteers. "You've become an executive," Brandon joked, upon seeing Ashley organizing schedules and coordinating activities. "I learned by watching you," Ashley replied. "And Dad taught me that organization is essential for any project to succeed." The project had expanded to also include vocational workshops for teenagers. They learned carpentry, sewing, computer skills, and other abilities they could use to generate income in the future. "The idea is that they don't depend only on social assistance," Ashley explained to visitors. "We want them to become independent and capable of helping other people." Brandon was impressed by the maturity and strategic vision his sister had developed. At 15, Ashley was already recognized as one of the most promising young social leaders in the region. "You should study administration or social work," suggested Brandon. "You have a lot of talent for it." "I'm thinking about it," Ashley replied, "but I also really like writing. Maybe I can combine the two things." The idea of combining personal passions with social impact was something Brandon was also exploring in his engineering studies. He had chosen to specialize in affordable housing and urban planning. "I want to learn to create spaces that truly meet the needs of families," Brandon said during a project presentation at the university. His senior thesis would be the design of a housing complex specifically planned for families transitioning out of the social assistance system. The idea was to create not just houses, but a community that facilitated social integration. "It's ambitious," commented his advisor, "but you have personal experience that few students have." Brandon spent months researching, visiting other housing projects, and interviewing families who had been through situations similar to his own. He wanted his project to be technically sound, but also humanely sensitive. "The houses need to have a space where children can play without bothering the adults," Brandon told his advisor. "And there needs to be a community area where families can get to know each other." The project also included a community school at the center of the complex, following the design Ashley had drawn years before. Brandon wanted to prove it was possible to create affordable housing that was both functional and beautiful. "Poor families deserve to live in beautiful places too," Brandon would say whenever he presented the project. During his final year of college, Brandon was approached by a construction company specializing in social projects. They wanted to hire him as soon as he graduated, offering a very good starting salary by the region's standards. "It's an incredible opportunity," said Walter, when Brandon told him about the offer. "You'll be able to work exactly in what you love." Brandon was tempted, but he also wanted to consider other options. He had received an offer to do a master's degree at the university, specifically studying social housing. It was a difficult choice between making money immediately or investing more time in education. "What is your heart saying?" asked Ashley. "That I want to be prepared to make a real difference," replied Brandon. "Maybe 2 years of a master's will give me a better theoretical foundation." The family supported Brandon's decision to continue studying. The master's scholarship was less than the salary offered by the construction company, but it would allow him to delve deeper into the issues that interested him most. "Money is important, but knowledge is forever," said Walter. "You're still young. You have time to earn money later." The master's degree allowed Brandon to further develop his housing project. He secured funding to build a detailed model and present the proposal at architecture and urban planning conferences. "Your project has the potential to be replicated in several cities," said one of the evaluators during a presentation in New York. Brandon was excited by the response, but he always remembered that the inspiration for all of it had come from the cave where he and Ashley had taken refuge so many years before. "If someone had told me back then that I would be here today, I wouldn't have believed it," Brandon said to Walter during a phone conversation. "I would have believed it," replied Walter. "I always saw a special potential in you both." During the Masters, Brandon also began writing a book about his experience. It wasn't fiction like Ashley's texts, but a personal account combined with technical proposals to improve the child and adolescent assistance system. "I want other children to read it and know that it's possible to overcome any situation," Brandon explained to his advisor. The book was being written on weekends when Brandon returned home and could talk at length with Walter and Ashley about memories of the past and the reflections they sparked. "Every chapter you write reminds me of how much you've both grown," said Walter after reading one of the drafts. Ashley, now 17, was finishing high school and had already decided to study journalism in college. She wanted to combine her passion for writing with social work, telling stories of people who overcame adversity. "I'm going to follow Brandon's example," said Ashley, "use my experience to help others." The Cave of Hope project had become so successful that other city governments wanted to implement similar programs. Ashley was being invited to give lectures and consultations on methodology for social work with vulnerable children. "It's surreal," Ashley said to Brandon during a conversation. "3 years ago, I was one of the children served by the project. Now I'm teaching other people how to care for children." The evolution of both siblings continued to surprise everyone who followed their story. Brandon was about to graduate with a master's thesis that would be published by a university press, and Ashley had been accepted to college with a full scholarship. "You are proof that investing in education transforms lives," said the Municipal Secretary of Education during a ceremony honoring the family. Walter, now 68, had retired from his job as a custodian, but remained an active volunteer in the social project. His experience and wisdom were fundamental in guiding the new children arriving in the program. "He's the grandfather all these children wish they had," commented one of the social workers. During his master's thesis defense, Brandon presented his final project, a comprehensive public policy proposal for social housing, integrated with educational and social assistance programs. "It's work that combines technical excellence with social sensitivity," said the chair of the examination committee. "You have a bright future ahead of you." Brandon graduated with honors from his master's program and immediately received several job offers. This time, he chose a position in the state government, where he could work on implementing housing policies for all of New Mexico. "It's the chance to make a difference on a larger scale," Brandon explained to his family. His first project in the new job was exactly the pilot implementation of the housing complex he had developed during his master's studies. The governor had taken an interest in the proposal and released funds to build a prototype in Albuquerque. "You'll be able to test your ideas right here near home," said Walter, proud of the coincidence. The construction of the pilot housing complex lasted 2 years. Brandon personally oversaw every stage, from the land selection to the final finishes. He wanted to make sure every detail he had planned was implemented correctly. "It's thrilling to see the design becoming reality," Brandon told Ashley during one of the site visits. The first families moved into the complex the same month Ashley graduated with her journalism degree. She had written her thesis on her brother's project, documenting the entire process from conception to occupancy. From refugees to builders, the experience of a housing project conceived by those who lived exclusion. Brandon read the title of Ashley's thesis. Ashley's thesis won a national award for collegiate journalism and was published in a specialized social policy magazine. Siblings who once hid in a cave were now national references in their respective fields. "You two should give a talk together," suggested Walter. "Tell the whole story from the beginning." The idea resulted in invitations to speak at universities, conferences, and social policy events across the country. Brandon spoke about the technical and architectural aspects, Ashley about communication and social mobilization, and sometimes Walter would join them to speak from the perspective of the one who provided shelter. "Our story shows that any child can overcome any obstacle if they have love and opportunity," Brandon would say during the talks. The pilot housing complex was a complete success. The families who moved there reported greater social integration, better school performance for the children, and a general sense of belonging to a real community. "It's different from other places I've lived," said one of the mothers interviewed by Ashley. "Here I feel my children have a future." Based on the pilot's success, the state government approved funds to replicate the model in 5 more cities across New Mexico. Brandon was promoted to coordinate the entire state social housing program. "In 5 years, you've gone from student to state manager," observed Ashley. "It's an impressive evolution." "And you've become a nationally recognized journalist," Brandon replied. "I think our family is doing well." Walter, now 70 years old, continued to proudly follow his children's progress. His health was good, and he maintained the energy to keep actively participating in the social project that had become his passion. "You've given me a purposeful old age," Walter said during the Sunday dinner, a tradition they kept religiously even with all their professional commitments. The Cave of Hope project had completed 10 years and had become a national model for social assistance programs. They had served over 1,000 children throughout the decade, many of whom were now successful adults in their respective fields. "We have a doctor, a teacher, a mechanic, a seamstress," Ashley recounted during an interview for a documentary about the project. "The important thing is that everyone found their path." One of the most moving achievements was when Emily, the girl Brandon had taken in during the project's early years, graduated with a degree in psychology and returned to work as a volunteer for the program. "Brandon taught me that I could help other children," said Emily. "Now it's my turn to give back." The circle had closed perfectly. Children who had been helped were now becoming adults who helped other children. It was exactly the kind of multiplier impact Brandon had always dreamed of creating. 10 years after completing his master's degree, Brandon decided to pursue a doctorate to delve even deeper into housing policy issues. He wanted to better understand how to replicate successful experiences in different regional contexts. "You never stop studying," Ashley joked. "It's just that there's always something new to learn," Brandon replied. "And the more I know, the better I can help." The doctorate allowed Brandon to spend a period studying in other countries, learning about international social housing experiences. He visited projects in the Netherlands, Chile, and Canada, always looking for ideas that could be adapted to the American reality. "Every place has its particularities," Brandon would say in his reports, "but the need for housing dignity is universal." During one of his study trips, Brandon received an unexpected invitation. An international organization was looking for experts to work with refugees in camps in Europe. The salary was very high, and the experience would be unique. "It's an incredible professional opportunity," Ashley said when Brandon told her about the invitation. "But it's far from family." Brandon was torn. Professionally, it would be a giant leap in his career. Personally, it would mean being far from Walter and Ashley, something he had never done for long periods. "What do you think?" Brandon asked during a family dinner. "I think you should do what will make you most fulfilled," Walter replied. "True family isn't undone by distance." "And you can always come back," Ashley added. "It's not an irreversible decision." The conversation helped Brandon decide. He accepted the international job for a period of 2 years, with the promise of returning to implement in the United States everything he learned abroad. "I'm going to miss you all so much," Brandon said at the farewell. "We will too," Walter replied, "but we are proud that you are taking our experience to help people in other countries." The work in Europe was challenging but extremely enriching. Brandon applied everything he had learned about social housing to create temporary yet dignified solutions for families who had lost everything in wars and political crises. "These refugees are going through the same thing I went through as a child," Brandon wrote in a letter to his family. "The difference is they have lost not just their family, but their country as well." The international experience gave Brandon a global perspective on housing issues. He realized that many of the problems he had faced in the United States existed elsewhere, but he also discovered innovative solutions that could be adapted. "I'm learning so much that every day away from you is worth it," Brandon would say during the weekly video calls with his family. Ashley used the period, while Brandon was away, to deepen her journalistic work. She began producing television documentaries about stories of overcoming adversity, always focusing on people who had transformed trauma into strength to help others. "It's my way of multiplying the message of the Cave of Hope project," explained Ashley. One of her documentaries won a national award and was broadcast nationwide. The story was about 3 different families who had gone through situations of vulnerability and now helped other people in similar difficulties. "You're becoming one of the country's most important journalists in the social field," said Walter, impressed with the recognition Ashley was receiving. "I learned from Brandon that success is only worthwhile if it can be used to help others," replied Ashley. The period Brandon spent in Europe coincided with an expansion phase of the Cave of Hope project. Ashley had secured sponsorship from a major company to bring the methodology to 10 more American cities. "We're growing faster than I imagined," Ashley said to Brandon during a video call. "I'm glad you're managing to run everything without me," replied Brandon. "It shows we built something truly solid." When Brandon returned from abroad, he found the social project much larger and more structured. Ashley had assembled a small administrative team and secured funding that guaranteed the program's sustainability for at least 5 years. "You've turned the project into a real institution," said Brandon, impressed with the organization. "It was necessary," explained Ashley. "We couldn't rely only on volunteerism to reach so many children." Brandon's international experience was fundamental for the next phase of his career. He was invited to work at the Department of Urban Development in Washington, coordinating housing programs for the entire country. "It's the chance to apply everything you've learned on a national scale," said Walter when Brandon told him about the invitation. "But it means living in Washington," said Brandon, worried again about the distance from his family. "This time it's different," said Ashley. "It's in the same country, and you'll be making a difference for thousands of American families." Brandon accepted the position in Washington, but negotiated to work in a hybrid format, spending half his time in the capital and half in Albuquerque, supervising regional projects. "It's the best of both worlds," said Walter. "You advance your career but don't completely distance yourself from the family." The work at the ministry allowed Brandon to implement his ideas on a national scale. He developed a program that combined social housing with educational and social assistance projects, directly inspired by the experience he had lived. "We're creating communities, not just houses," Brandon explained to state managers. The program was named Home to Grow and mandatorily included community spaces where local organizations could develop social projects similar to Cave of Hope. "It's the institutionalization of the philosophy you developed," commented a colleague of Brandon's. In 5 years working at the department, Brandon managed to implement the program in over 100 American cities. Each project was adapted to the local reality, but all followed the basic principles he had learned from his own life experience. "Every family that moves into these developments is getting the chance we had," Brandon said during an interview for a television program. Ashley continued to grow in journalism and eventually opened her own production company, specializing in social documentaries. She kept the Cave of Hope project as a parallel activity, but now with a professional team handling the operations. "I managed to combine personal passion with professional success," said Ashley during an interview about her journey. Walter, at 75, continued to actively participate in the social project, but now more as an advisor and father figure to the new generations of volunteers. His experience was valued by everyone who knew the family's story. "He is the living memory of the project," Ashley would tell the new volunteers. "Everything we know about welcoming vulnerable children we learned from him." The 20th anniversary of the meeting in the cave was celebrated with a big party at the school where it all began. Hundreds of people attended. Children who had been helped by the project, families who lived in Brandon's housing complexes, co-workers, public officials. 20 years ago, we were 2 scared kids hiding in a cave," said Brandon during his speech. "Today we are a family that has helped thousands of other families find their way. And it all started with a man who never gave up searching for his lost family," added Ashley, looking affectionately at Walter. Walter was moved by the tributes, but insisted the success belonged to the children he had found. "You taught me that family isn't just blood," said Walter. "It's love, dedication, and mutual commitment." The party included an exhibition with photographs from all phases of the Cave of Hope project and models of the housing projects developed by Brandon. It was a visual summary of 2 decades of impactful social work. "It's impressive to see everything you've built," commented the mayor of Albuquerque. "You are an example for the entire country." During the exhibition, Brandon and Ashley announced their next projects. He was writing a technical manual on integrated social housing, which would be distributed free to public managers across the country. She was producing a documentary series about 20 years of the Cave of Hope project. "We want to systematize everything we've learned so others can replicate it," explained Brandon. "And we want to show that any community can create similar programs," added Ashley. Brandon's manual was launched the following year and became a national reference in housing policies. The book combined technical aspects with personal reflections on the importance of family and community support. "It's a technical manual with a soul," commented a specialized reviewer. Ashley's documentary series was shown on a national streaming platform and generated significant impact. Many cities contacted the production company to implement projects similar to Cave of Hope. "The documentary is inspiring a new generation of social projects," said Ashley during an interview. At 40, Brandon was invited to give a lecture at the United Nations on housing policies for vulnerable populations. It was the definitive international recognition of his work. "You're going to speak to the whole world," said Walter, proud. "I'm going to talk about our family," replied Brandon, "about how support transforms lives." The UN lecture was a success and resulted in invitations to advise housing programs in other countries. Brandon accepted a few specific projects, always keeping his work in the United States as his base. "I want to help other countries, but my priority is here," Brandon would say. Ashley, at 35, had become one of the country's most respected journalists in the social field. Her production company grew and now employed 15 people, all dedicated to telling stories of overcoming and social transformation. "Every documentary we make is a way to multiply hope," Ashley would tell her team. Walter, at 80, continued to surprise everyone with his energy and lucidity. He had become a kind of patriarch not only to the family, but to the entire community involved with the social project. "You are an inspiration to all of us," said one of the newest volunteers. "You all inspire me," replied Walter. "You give me the energy to keep going." The Cave of Hope project had reached its 25th year and had expanded to over 50 American cities. Estimates indicated that more than 10,000 children had been directly helped over the years. "It's an extraordinary legacy," said the Secretary of Urban Development during a tribute ceremony. "It's the result of a lot of collective work," replied Brandon, always careful not to take credit for himself. One of the family's greatest joys was when Emily, the girl Brandon had taken in during the project's early years, defended her doctorate in social psychology and announced she would open a clinic specializing in childhood trauma. "Everything I know about care I learned from the project," said Emily during her graduation party. "And now you're going to multiply that knowledge," replied Brandon, moved. Stories like Emily's repeated themselves constantly. The project had created a network of people who helped each other and who reproduced the values of care in their own professional and family environments. "You've created a culture of care," observed a researcher studying the project's impact. "That's exactly it," agreed Ashley. "We changed the way an entire community deals with vulnerable children." At 45, Brandon decided it was time to dedicate himself more to family. Walter was 85 and, although still lucid and active, needed more care and attention. "I want to cherish every moment I have with him," Brandon said to Ashley. "It's the right decision," agreed Ashley. "Work is important, but family is forever." Brandon reduced his professional commitments and spent more time in Albuquerque, caring for Walter and participating more actively in the daily life of the social project. It was a way of repaying all the care he had received. "Now I take care of you," Brandon said to Walter. "You always took care of me," replied Walter. "You gave me purpose and joy." Walter's final years were filled with much love and attention from the family. Brandon and Ashley took turns caring for him, ensuring he never felt alone or abandoned. "You are the best children a man could have," Walter would often say. And, "You are the best father we could have found," Brandon would reply. Walter passed away at 90 in peace, surrounded by the children he had chosen to love. His wake was a celebration of life, with hundreds of people paying tribute to the man who had dedicated 3 decades of his life to caring for vulnerable children. "He taught us that love is a daily choice," said Brandon during the funeral speech. "And that family is so much more than blood," added Ashley. After Walter's passing, Brandon and Ashley grew even closer. They continued living in the same house where they had grown up, turning it into a living memorial of the family they had built together. "This house tells our whole story," said Ashley. "And it remains our meeting place," replied Brandon. The Cave of Hope project continued operating as a permanent tribute to Walter's memory. Brandon and Ashley created a scholarship fund in his name to ensure vulnerable children had access to higher education. It's the way to keep alive everything he taught us, explained Brandon during the fund's launch. Today, at 50, Brandon is recognized as one of the country's leading authorities on social housing. Ashley, at 45, is a journalist respected internationally. But more than successful professionals, they are a living example of how love can transform any situation. Our story began in a dark cave, says Brandon when telling his journey, but a family's love brought us into the light. The Cave of Hope project remains active in over 100 American cities, serving thousands of children every year. The original cave, where it all began, has been turned into a memorial with permanent flowers and a plaque that reads, "Place where a family found each other and decided to help other families find each other too." Sometimes I go back there just to remember where we came from, says Ashley. And to be grateful for everything we've managed to build, adds Brandon. The story of the siblings who took refuge in a cave and found not just shelter, but an entire family, continues to inspire people across the country, proof that no matter how dark the night, there is always hope for a new dawn. End of story. And now, tell us, what did you think of this story of overcoming and connection? Have you ever experienced a situation where you discovered that family goes far beyond blood ties? Your opinion is very important to us. Leave your sincere comment, your like to support our work, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.